Hello, hello. Sorry for the delay on this video on this Wednesday. I am super excited about this conversation. I am Kina, and I'm dialing in from Houma and Choctaw lands that have been unceded, and I feel like I want to have like a qualifier here. Hey Mary, as we're waiting for our special guest Lettie Gore to be a part, and that is that this conversation is happening at the thank you, welcome. This conversation is happening in a very specific context. Hey Mary, this conversation is happening at a very specific context, and conversation is happening at the Anti-Blackness Reader Project. And so I always like to let people know at the top of these conversations, as we're waiting for our special guest to join us, that means that this is a conversation that is cultivated by Black folks, for Black folks, and we welcome engagement with people who are not Black, but we also want to remind people who are not Black that they aren't centered in the conversation. What I usually like to tell folks is that you're a guest, right? And so feel free to engage, ask questions, but just be mindful that it is folks who identify as Black, folks who are part of the African diaspora, who get centered on this particular platform. And we love when other people can learn from us. All right. So my special guest tonight is Lettie Gore, and Lettie's going to join me, and we're having a conversation. And the conversation is really about understanding the difference between oppression Olympics and Lettie is oppression Olympics versus historical fact finding. And of course, that means that if I'm going to have this conversation about history, why not call up your friend who happens to be an actual historian? And so that's always great. Okay, sis. Okay. Hi. Just saying what the conversation is about. And I was saying, hey, I got, it was like, oh, I know a historian. So let's do that.
It's me. I'm a historian.
Just be like, I just, do you remember, this is probably a horrible thing, but do you remember when, hey Angel, hey Bobby, do you remember when, what was his name? Mitt Romney was running for president against Obama?
Yes. Girl.
And they had that debate. He's like, I've got a binder full of women.
Oh, I do remember that. Oh my God, what a time.
So I just put up with women. I'm like, I got binders full of excellent Black folks,
Honestly,
but
we do. We really do though. And you definitely do. So
So we are having a conversation around oppression Olympics versus historical fact finding. And I gotta say, I'm starting this conversation, Lettie, feeling some kind of way.
Okay.
I just did my first internet cuss out today.
Oh, okay.
I have no regrets.
No.
I tell people this whole month I'm choosing violence. And I feel like it's overdue.
It is. And also people should just stop. Just stop. Stop it.
And so I reminded people that we are having this conversation in this platform for a very, very specific reason, which is we're centering the Black experience, the Black voice. We are excited for, Angel is my first, because I don't choose.
Right, that's what I said. I was like, I'm
really graceful, but today I had time, and I figured out how to use cuss words. And so we're having this conversation here for a very specific reason. We want to center Black voices, Black truth, and Black triumph. And so, here we are. It's I call it Black Pride Month, but happy Pride, all of our Black queer families, trans family members. It's Black Music Month, right? Juneteenth happens in this month, and so I always think of June as like the Black History Month Part 2, like the remix. Like,
yes. Yes, that is it.
with that in mind, what I really feel like led me to wanting this particular conversation was really seeing anti-Blackness show itself up so strongly. I mean, we saw it in February, but people really struggling to understand at least two premises, right? One, that there is nothing wrong with Black folks centering their experiences.
No.
But people stay mad.
Don't they, though? Like, they really do. They really do.
So mad. And then two, recognizing how that I know that what my lane is. And I think the struggle is a lot of people, especially for people in any kind of justice work, anti-oppression work, struggle with what their lane is, and they project that shit.
Yeah. And
so exhausting. I just felt like it was important. So that's the premise. But I want you to go ahead for people, which I don't know how people don't know you, but just in case, tell people who you are.
My name is Lettie Gore. I am a historian. I'm a racial justice educator. I have a podcast called History Shows Us. It used to be called Sincerely Lettie, but I changed the name last year. I am all about all the history. I mean, I used to hate history, believe it or not. People are so shocked when I told them that. I'm like, no, I used to hate it because I was like, all we learned about was old white men. And then I went to college and I was like, oh, so there's a whole lot more. And I loved it so much that I was like, let me just go and get a master's in it and kind of question my life choices. But it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And then I went, and then I got a second master's in conflict management and resolution. So I finished that during COVID. Well, we're still in COVID, but in May 2020, I finished that. So yeah, I do a lot of things. I have a business I officially started in March this year. It's Lettie's History Education and Consulting Services, INC. So I just started that and trying to do the website thing and all the things and whatnot to get all things going while life is lifing. And just in the meantime, trying to educate out here in a way that I feel like people usually don't see history being talked about. I like to connect the dots. I want people to see that history is not this thing where it's just dates and times. That's not it. I can recite all the presidents in order. That doesn't mean anything if you don't know the context, right? It doesn't mean anything. So anyway, and I like to rant. I like to go on history rants, and I like to talk shit.
There we go. Woo! I mean, I spent half of the day reading about Abraham Lincoln because I feel so, well, I don't feel bad. Let me not say I feel bad, but I have to like pop people's bubble around him all the time.
All the time.
You know,
all the time.
So part of what happens in Juneteenth is people need to reckon with history, right? Yeah. And I think in the United States, people really struggle to reckon with it because so much of it has been whitewashed. And so I think tonight's conversation could be helpful in giving people facts and some layers that complicate stuff. And I also want to tell folks, like, you're not going to walk away from this conversation with, I think, more answers. If anything, you probably will walk away from it with more questions. And for me, that's a win. Okay?
Yes.
Don't necessarily have any call to action here, right? We're not going to like end this conversation and tell you who to contact, but we want to plant some seeds that hopefully can manifest deeper knowing.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I often see, Lettie, in my work is I'm often accused of erasure, okay, of other people of the global majority, okay. It happens personally. It happens publicly. I literally made a reel, I think, at the top of the week that was about Black people getting reparations. Yeah. And people who are not Black were like, what about? What about? And what about these people? That don't got nothing to do with what's happening in this conversation.
Nothing
at all.
Nothing. And then my thing is then, right, so what about though? Since you asked me, so why don't you have a conversation? Since you want to come at me, let's just do it, right?
If that is so important to you,
Right.
create.
Like, what have you done?
So I thought it would be helpful to give people an understanding of at least 3 concepts, and then we can kind of go off onto some other things, okay?
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
And this is the teacher in me, right? Like teacher talk, right? So the first thing I'm accused of was complicity, well, erasure, all right? So let's talk about that. Oh, Kina, you're talking about anti-Blackness. What about Indigenous folks? What about AAPI folks, right? So let's talk about erasure first. According to Cambridge Dictionary, the erasure is the act of causing a feeling, a memory, or a period of time to be completely forgotten. Or it can be considered the act of removing or destroying something, especially something that shows that that person or thing ever existed or happening. Generally speaking, Black folks aren't doing this to other groups, other indigenous groups, people of the global majority. One, we don't have the institutional power to do that shit. I don't know how many Black people own the media, how many Black people are leading Fortune 500 companies, how many people run government, Black people run government agencies. So from an institutional place, we don't even have the means to do that if I wanted to. All right. So I wanted to stop right there because that's something that often I hear a lot. All right. The second thing I wanted to talk about is this concept of complicity. All right. So vocabulary.com says complicity is involvement in a wrongful act. It refers to the act of helping someone else behave inappropriately or illegally. All right. So it's like aiding and abetting, driving the getaway car.
Yeah.
I wasn't the mastermind behind the crime, but maybe something I did might have pushed it along.
Right.
Perfect example. The white woman who lied on Emmett Till.
Yeah.
Right?
Or just the entire American government throughout history. Just the whole thing.
All right.
The whole government.
So I think and this is something that's really dear to me, right? Which is, let's start with our understandings of indigenous and native rights. That is not my lane. And more importantly, I think that it would be problematic for me as someone who doesn't have lived experience in that community to be naming, right? To be addressing those ideas, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that I kind of want to lead with, right? Is lived experience is extremely important in any anti-oppression work.
Yeah.
And I think because we're so used to people speaking on behalf of communities and calling that allyship, that the expectation is that everyone has to speak for every community. So let's start there, Lettie.
Yeah. Quite a bit of things. I'm also looking at my computer because I have stuff pulled up here. So I also come across this a lot where it becomes something where it's like, oh, but what about this group of people at this time in history? Or, oh, well, this was also happening. Yeah, you are right. That was also happening. But I ain't talking about that right now. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about that. It's really, really frustrating as well. So, okay, I have a lot of things because you said a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
Just going to go. And you mentioned something about memory and like how people look at history, basically. There is a clash with history and memory. There's a clash. We see it a lot with Civil War history, right? We see it a lot with that. There's tons of books written about it. Race and Reunion by David Blight. The Southern Past. Like, I have books on my shelf that are about this. And that doesn't help anything, right? And that's racist white people. I'm going to say that because that's usually who it, but what I also see that's really irritating to me too is the defensiveness and the arguing that happens whenever I'm like, no, this is not what I'm talking about right in this moment. I'm not talking about, for example, I don't know. I'm not talking about the Indian Removal Act. I hate that that's named that because I hate that it's named that, but I'm not talking about that right now. What I'm talking about is what was happening, for example, to stolen African people in 1824, right? Indian Removal Act was 1824, but I'm not talking about that right now. Now, I am going to talk about that whenever I'm talking about the fact that the Indian Removal Act happened to steal land or take land from indigenous people, which was absolutely not okay, in order to allow enslavers here in the United States that were white people to do interstate slave trading, as books call it, which was also known as trafficking, right? And so that's what I'm going to talk about. That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to center Black people because I'm talking about slavery, Black people in slavery. Now, if I want to be talking about the Indian Removal Act and what happened and the devastation and how it affected indigenous people, yes, then that's going to be the focus of what I'm talking about. But that ain't the topic, though. I can still acknowledge both of them. You can acknowledge both things. Both things can and should be acknowledged, because you actually cannot look at any history of the Deep South, of this whole country, without looking at the forced removal of indigenous people. They're not inseparable in history. They're just not. They're interwoven, but history books don't present it that way, right? So I wanted to say that.
Yeah. And I particularly wanted to bring that up because A, this is something that people have asked me a lot, and B, because of my own commitment to be on a decolonial journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to your point, these are concurrent violations. These are concurrent acts of racial terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be violent for us to admit that, right? But I also think it would be equally violent for us to stand in a gap in a way that is far removed from our lived experiences. And so one of the things that I do is I specifically, even in this page, I talk about anti-Blackness, that really is connected to whiteness and white supremacy. And oftentimes people are saying, well, what about these other groups of people? Right? And, you know, I don't know if there's always a perfect answer. I think there's an honest answer. I think it's important that we look at these as interlocking systems, right? Like to your point, while, you know, Native people are getting their lands taken from them and experiencing violent genocide, right? There's also simultaneously this move to dehumanize Black folks. And so it is hard to parse them apart.
Yes.
And I want to name that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's even more difficult to do that when you don't have insider experience, insider knowledge of some of those things.
Yeah.
I think we also do a disservice in oppressive anti-oppression spaces when we attempt to have all the lanes, right? I can't have all the conversations and I can't do all the things because again, the limitations of my own lived experience, but also, again, it's a disservice, right? To the population or communities I'm not a part of. And do you feel as though, like, I don't know, you don't have to agree with me, but do you feel like it would be a violation for us to be speaking on behalf of communities that we're not a part of? We're not speaking on behalf, but inserting ourselves in conversations that don't directly respond to our lived experiences.
No, and there's no. Oh, sorry, I have a lot of. So I'm thinking about history too, because I'm not going to go, I don't know, 20 miles west of me right now and go to any area where descendants of original indigenous people live and try to tell them how they should view the government and tell them what they should do with their land. I'm just not. Because first of all, you better not roll up on them because that's just not the move. Number one, right? It's just not the move. And I don't say that in a way where it's like dangerous. No, what I mean is you don't roll up on people like that. You don't roll up on people. Like why would you do that, right? That's very, and so I don't. to bring some history into this, I don't think it's so much as speaking on behalf, because I can't speak on behalf of other people.
Yeah.
I'm a Black woman, right? I can talk about my lived experiences. What I can also do is talk about the history that I've read and talk about the different books that have been written about things where I've seen these arguments and I've seen primary source documents and I've connected the dots with some things. I can do that, but I can never speak for any other group of people. The thing is, though, what we see throughout history, and I actually just did a reel today with, it's like a 60-second reel. Ella Baker is at the Puerto Rico rally in 1974. It's this like solidarity rally. And people are always so shocked whenever they learn that there were so many Black people that did international like that were activists internationally, right? I'm like, well, that's because that's what history shows us it's always been about. I mean, this goes back to slavery. It's never been, our freedom struggle has always been intertwined with the global freedom struggle of Black and brown people. Always. I mean, always. During slavery, whenever you had free Black people who were in northern states, they were finding out about what was happening in what we know now as the Caribbean, like what we know now as some South American countries. They were finding out these things going on, and they were getting courage and they were getting empowerment from it. And they were getting inspiration from it. I mean, this goes all the way to apartheid in Africa in the 60s, right? I mean, it's never been separate. And so what I've seen, I mean, even here in the 60s, you know, people talk about the Black Panthers all the time. They're like, oh, the Panthers this, Panthers that. Yeah, well, they also had a whole rainbow coalition. So, but they never spoke for other people in different groups. What they did is they tried to show, look, we all victims of capitalism. Every last one of us. We're all being oppressed, right? Now, we can bring our different lived experiences to this meeting, to this organizing strategy meeting. We can bring our lived experiences and figure out how to work together, but not trying to speak for you. No. Yeah. And I think some of that's been, I still see that, but I don't see it. Because there is much more of this oppression Olympics idea. And that's not to say this didn't exist then either. Because let me tell you something. People have this idea that everybody that was Black was all about civil rights movement. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, right? That's not how that worked. That's not how it works now. Yeah. Right? And so just to go back, I don't think it's about, not speaking on behalf, but bringing in common experiences with oppression.
Well, and I think the for me, the verb here is solidarity, right? I think it's totally okay for people to look at people of the global majority and want and express a need for solidarity, right? And solidarity is me being able to say to other people within the, the global majority, hey, I'm aware of the issues your community experiences. I'm aware and have sympathy for the way that white supremacy and whiteness shows up, right? I'm aware of the ways in which generational trauma exists in your community, right? That I think can be expected for Black and brown people across the globe and across the Americas, right? But I think people, again, are confused. I want to say what I said before. Like, for Black folks to be able to be responsible for erasure, I think we would have to have a lot more institutional power to do so. But part of the struggle here is, and we've talked about this, right? Which is people, and I want to give this a really specific framework, the United States, right? Because I think this hits different if we were in Brazil, right?
Yes.
Which is a whole different conversation.
Yes.
Different if we were in Caribbean. Yes. So I really want to make specific sense around the United States. We don't have enough institutional power to provide erasure,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part where people get tricked up. They think because people are talking about Black folks,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The news is talking about Black folks, then that means everyone cares about Black liberation and humanity and justice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a smokescreen, Lettie, is what it is.
Yes,
Right?
it is.
And that is a very frustrating thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if what public opinion, or let's not even say public opinion, if what public dialogue and actual legislative outcomes, if those things don't match.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as people are talking about Black people's rights or Black Lives Matter, we don't have the legislative track record to prove that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
So because people are talking about Black folks does not mean that people are actually acting on the behalf or advocating for Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think other groups do get confused by that. I've literally had folks say, well, everybody cares about Black people, and every time people are talking about racism, it's about Black people. And I try to have a lot of compassion for my Black and for my brown kindred across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very frustrating, Lettie, because I'm like, okay, maybe people are talking about us, but where are the outcomes of the talking?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lettie, I already know you know this. When was the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill passed?
This year.
This year, in 2022.
Yeah.
But people have been talking about our fallen ancestor since he was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get what I'm saying? Like, that's a really frustrating thing. People are talking about us, and we could have a whole nother conversation about why people talk about Black folks.
Yep.
Right?
Sure.
And I think part of it is a rhetorical strategy that, again, smokescreen.
Yes.
America gets to pretend it cares.
And it doesn't, and it never has. It's always been something performative. This country has always expected marginalized people, people who are oppressed, and especially Black people, to not be able to know what's going on, which is why we were not able to be educated, right? Like we weren't able, we couldn't do that. Even after slavery, during Reconstruction, well into the 60s, even now, our schools were burned down, right? There's always there's always been a fear of losing power, fear of losing white supremacy. And what you said about people being upset about erasure and saying that it's always about Black people and it's always about racism that Black people experience, it's because what we experience is a specific type of racism. It's a specific the racism that we experience is also anti-Black racism. It's anti-Black. I mean, period. I mean, I could get into a lot of things now, but we can do this right here. I'm gonna say it real quick because you know how I am. I gotta like put something in there. We could have a whole conversation about passing, right? We could have a whole conversation about passing. Have a whole conversation about the assimilation into whiteness, the assimilation into whiteness, and the assimilation into the white community based on people's skin color. Yeah, we can do that. I make people real.
Well, I mean, what you're saying is the racial hierarchy.
Yes, that's exactly, yes. And
so,
yes.
Which existed in the past and exists now.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, and I'm a big girl, so I can handle the heat that comes from this. Every group of folks, brown group of folks in the United States, has learned that part of how they get protections and resources is making sure that they keep the racial hierarchy going. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not making this up, right?
No.
So and I'm just using this as an example, but even we're talking about the 5 civilized tribes of natives in the United States. Part of what happens is the ownership of enslaved folks to further along like that hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. To be more in alignment with whiteness and white supremacy. Mm-hmm. All right. Now you have a lot of people who would argue, well, it was a forced situation for a lot, like the Choctaws, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's space for that argument. Mm-hmm. But we can't deny that even indigenous folks owned Black people too. And it was a strategy that was created by white supremacy to make sure that we were at the bottom of the racial hierarchy.
Oh, absolutely.
Even while they are simultaneously experiencing racial terror. So let me say that 2 more times so no one cusses me out. All right? Yes, genocide. Yes, land theft. All of those things are happening. But a strategy that gets employed even in that moment is, okay, well, when we own Africans, maybe the white people, right, will recognize where we belong in the hierarchy. And that is the reality. And it's ugly and it's messy, but I'm not making this shit up.
No, you're not. And I've had quite a few people before like push back on me about that just because they've never read it before. I'm like, well, neither did I growing up. I didn't either. Right? It's like, all right, and I'm not just making this stuff up. I don't make up history, right? But indigenous people, yeah, they enslaved other indigenous people.
Well,
right?
that's what I was about to say. Even after the Europeans arrived and like enforced themselves in their ways to those communities, that happened too. And let me also make sure I make this clear. There was a huge attempt to massively enslave Native folks, right? So that is also true. So not only was there European seizure of lands, but there was enslavement of Native folks. Then Natives started to enslave their own folks. And then lastly, once it was more cemented who was going to be at the bottom, they started to enslave Africans.
Yeah, because it goes right along with people who were scientists. They weren't scientists. They were just random white people that deemed themselves scientists. It goes right along with the timeline. So between, I mean, and this isn't, I want to clarify for people because I know that oftentimes what happens with history is people don't really realize how much time gaps we're talking about. So indigenous people, so we're talking late 1600s to mid 1700s. Whenever you started to see indigenous people, definitely for the mid 1700s, you started to see indigenous people who were seeing like, okay, how can I survive? This is very layman's term for people who have never like heard me talk about history. I'm very layman's terms with history. And so what you saw too though were these white people were like, okay, how can we like profit and how can we get them on our side? Because now we found this other group of people that are actually inferior to us and they're subhuman. So let's go get them. Let's go steal them. Let's go steal more of them from Africa. Because all these scientists, right, they started doing these research projects and all this crap that wasn't valid. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But you also started to see, I would say, if I'm correct, like the late 1700s, early 1800s, what you started to see also, though, was indigenous women having children with some free Black people and also some enslaved Black people. And so whenever you then fast forward, and I actually have a note about this, I was thinking about this earlier. Let me find it. Whenever you start thinking about the Black people and indigenous people, like people don't think about things like the First Seminole War. They don't think about the like Seminole Wars, right? They don't they don't think about the fact that Black people and indigenous people were called savages in the First Seminole War. Like the Seminole Wars were basically wars against their enslavers. That's what this was. But then what you also saw, and there's more history that goes with this, is like the disconnect within the communities and all this stuff. But I just keep thinking about how you have countless people who want to, whenever I say things like this, they want to just say, okay, well, we should just focus on this though, because we're already focusing on Black people a lot. We should focus on this. Okay, well, I'm one person. And if you want to do that, like if you want to take that, great. But again, right now I'm just trying to show a similarity. So anyway.
Yeah, and I want to tie a bow here. So there's like an end point, a capstone here. Part of the strategy of really, I mean, forcing, I don't know if that's the best way to determine it, but creating a space where Native Indigenous folks are now enslaving Black folks is to keep coalition building from happening, right? Because, like, to your point, there are all these waves of where, like, I was reading earlier about how, like, the first Spanish settlement in the United States, like, there was a revolt and the Black people ran into the woods and no one heard from them since. And the idea has been that they connected with Indigenous people and became community. So whiteness and white supremacy are always trying to find ways to keep people of the global majority, specifically in the United States, Black people and Indigenous people, split apart. And so I think part of that pressure was to make sure, like, let's make sure we create division here so that they can't work together and combine their energy, their life forces to work against the white colonizers that were in that place, that were settling in this place. And so that's the thing that I want to complicate. And we're still seeing that today, right? Which is Black and brown people being torn apart by white supremacy, being torn apart by whiteness. And specific strategies are utilized to use that falseness of racial superiority to make sure that we don't coalition build.
Right.
Oh,
yeah.
Right. And so I am more than okay. So I guess the second thing I want to talk about is centering ourselves is an erasure, right? I would never say to any group that, hey, you don't get to prioritize land back, or hey, you don't get to prioritize that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I would never say that.
If my Asian American Pacific Islander kin are like, look, we are just like, in fact, let me give you another example. For our kin in Hawaii, the indigenous people groups there that are like, y'all don't need to come to Hawaii. We are on a struggle bus. We fighting colonialism. I'm not mad at them. And I ain't about to take my Black ass to Hawaii either.
No,
I can't afford it. But that, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not my fight. That's not my lane. I could be in solidarity by amplifying those messages, but I'm not going to say, well, why y'all not trying to figure out Black Lives Matter? No, I'm not. I'm not going to insist that, right? I mean, at the same time, they shouldn't be out here being like, white lives matter. And I think that's the difference. Do you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Like, hey, I think it is completely okay for you to center the challenges your community is facing. My job is to, when I can, amplify that. Solidarity, which is having an awareness of it, being thoughtful about it. But I don't have to lend 90% of my energy to that cause. And I don't have to critique you because you're not putting 90% of your shit to my cause.
No.
Because absolutely. We are all experiencing in real time racial terror.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's real. And yeah, because the way these plane ticket prices are set up, I'm not going anywhere. But
I told people who are like, oh, I'm thinking about going to Hawaii. I'm like, AKA, I just want y'all to know, I actually have a video that I keep on standby that I'll be like, let me just show you this video because they have told us, the indigenous folks have said, can y'all not come here? You know?
No, right. They've already, right. Like, I'm not going to get, no. But yeah, centering ourselves is not erasure. It's definitely not that. And again, this country has always done whatever it could to ensure that people banding together from different racialized groups, once they realize, oh wait, we're all being oppressed. Oh wait, we're all victims of capitalism. Let me tell you something. This country will quickly do something to make sure that those alliances are taken care of. Like, as in no longer in existence. No. And whenever I say that, I want people to like understand, I don't necessarily mean physically. I mean that's included, whether people want to believe that or not, but whatever. People say things are conspiracy theories. I'm like, nah, no, they're not. It's just easier to think that because you don't want to think that people could do things to people. Anyway.
Can you bring us, because I think this is helpful, right? Can you bring us specifically to how we saw this happening pre or post Civil War with white solidarity, like particularly like the working class poor white people attempting to be in solidarity with enslaved folks?
Oh, yes. So the Reconstruction era. So we're talking, all right, so
Lettie uses that term. I don't, she's a historian. I don't.
Yeah, I'm like, absolutely I can trace it. Yeah, so you had the Civil War ended. And then Lincoln was killed, Civil War ended. Okay. And then you had the fake outcry, or like the fake stuff with like the government, like, oh, we're going to help and we're going to do all these things for the
Bureau. People. It was a thing. History shows us it did exist.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then people are like, oh, the Reconstruction era was just a failure. Nah, it was sabotage. No, it wasn't. It was not a failure. They purposely sabotaged it. Okay? Because basically the government was like, all right, we're going to try to help. Oh, actually, nah. We're going to tap out because these white people are like, they got money and we want to be able to benefit from them and all their blood money from slavery. So let's just tap out and we're going to try to just figure it out. And we're going to give the rights and all these things to the same people that we said we were not going to.
We're also the reparations to those same people.
To the enslavers.
Reparations were given post-Civil War.
To the enslavers. To the white people. Right. So there's that. But what you had is you had Democrats and you had Republicans. Back then, they would have been flipped. I want to tell people this. People are always like, oh, Lincoln was the Republican Party. No, the party switched after the New Deal in the 30s and Great Depression and definitely in the 60s. Like, nah, Lincoln would not have identified as a Republican today. We'll switch. Total conversation.
I'm gonna side-eye you because I'm like, I don't.
No, and that's the thing though, is when we talk about like political parties today, I'm already like, first of all, the whole system sucks. The whole thing should just go.
It really does.
The whole thing should go. It's a death trap. I mean, it's just not okay. It's not okay. But Lincoln would not have been someone that the media wants to call a Republican today, right? Because we know, I mean, cyanide, everything. I'm like, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. People still be trying to. Lincoln apologists want to make him more progressive than what he really was, and
they really do.
They be reaching.
They're gonna dislocate a shoulder reaching that far. I'm like, y'all are wild out here. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, he wasn't that. Like he wasn't
that.
He just wasn't.
Just like your President Joe Biden ain't that. I said
right. And then people say things like, oh, well, then why did you have so many black people soon after that who were all about Lincoln? Because that's all they knew as far as freedom went. Are you kidding? Lincoln was who they saw as who freed them.
Ooh, Lettie, I just had a psychic download.
What?
Any white person who even attempts to seem to be supportive, we're like, okay, yeah, he a good one, right? Mm-hmm. And that's because that terrorism that lives inside of us is always looking for some semblance of hope within white people.
Yes.
How is that not something we're dealing with right now?
Yes, it is. Because the trauma, because it's passed down. It gets passed down.
So just one person who happens to be racialized as white makes a video that says, what they did to those black children is wrong. And everyone's like, yes, thank you. I'm so over that. I'm sorry, but I just am. And I feel that same kind of aesthetic gets applied to Lincoln. Like, just because he was willing to say slavery could be bad or morally imprehensible, now we are giving him we're painting him with this broad brush of benevolence.
Right. And there's nuance, right? There's nuance to it. Because I'm never going to deny the fact that like Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. I'm never going to deny that. That's a fact. That's a historical fact. Absolutely it is. Yes, he did. And you know what else? There's all this other information. If you dig a little further, and you'll see other things that he said about how he wished that he could just not have to free any of them. Said that. He said
There's
it.
the $600,000 that he secured from Congress to send our black asses someplace else. Mm-hmm. Right?
He's like, why don't y'all just go back to Africa? Why don't we just ship them away?
Or where else can they go? He had the Secretary of Interior like, well, can you find some place for them in the Caribbean? Can they go to Brazil?
Yep.
Anywhere but here.
He did. He did, right? And so, but I want people to understand that you can acknowledge the fact that Lincoln signed a document which led to the institution of slavery ending. I won't say slavery ended, institution of slavery ending. And also be like, nah, but let's define the word freedom. Let's define slavery, because what? Nah, that's not actually what happened. So I forgot your question, Kina, already, because we're on a whole other tangent.
So I just want to kind of get us so we can see if people have any questions. So kind of just a recap, right? Centering your community and your community issues is not erasure.
No.
All right? Centering your community issues is vital for any of us who are seeking freedom and liberation, right? What can be expected is solidarity.
Yeah.
That can be expected. And then the third thing I said is, we as Black people cannot be accused of erasure because we don't have the institutional power to make it so.
No, right. And I need for people, and I'm just going to repeat that too, the part about the institutional power. That is what people have got to understand, because institutional power is part of what racism is in this country, right? We're talking about the United States in here. We're not talking about any European countries. No, none of that, right? We're not doing that. We're talking about here. We aren't talking about Canada right now. We're not talking about the United States. Because it's very, there are things that are very specific to our country.
Yes.
That you will not find in any other country in the world.
Yes.
And no, centering ourselves is not erasure. And solidarity is something that we see throughout history. Solidarity is what got us to the same things people want to talk about with the civil rights movement. Solidarity, right, is what got us, people want to post Dr. King quotes and everything. Or even, my favorite is when people want to post Stokely Carmichael, but then he became Kwame Ture. They want to post his quotes and things, and I'm like, yeah, but then you want to talk about how we're centering ourselves, but you posting Kwame though? Do you know who he was? Do you know what he said? It's no, you got, it's not just the surface. It's not just about the surface.
And can I feel like there's an invisible question here. It's part of the reason why we center ourselves, folks like you and I center Black people in our work, in our conversations, on our platforms, is because we have yet to see any reparative justice movement happen in relationship to enslavement. None. Nan. Nothing.
Literally nothing.
While there is a Bureau of Indian Affairs that exists in the United States Interior, created in 1824, and it has only done things in half measure. So let me put that out there for anybody say, well, Kina said that fixed all the things. Hell no. No. Hashtag land back.
Yeah.
Pay them people what you owe them.
Yeah.
Return unceded territory.
Yeah.
There is no federal agency that has been charged with responding to the enslavement of almost 13 million people. That does not exist.
Nope.
Right? So, no, I don't have to stop having these conversations around reparations. No, I don't have to stop saying stop being anti-Black, because we've not seen any movement on a federal level to repair. And there cannot, you can't even, in terms of dollars and cents, there can't be any repayment.
No.
But we don't even have the Bureau of African American Affairs. And when I tell that to people are always like, yeah, we do. I'm like, haha, where at?
Where?
It don't exist.
Where? That doesn't exist.
That is not a thing.
That's not anywhere. And
let me just tell you this, Lettie. Somebody had a nerve to fix their face on Aretha Franklin's internet to say, what about welfare in Section 8?
Why do people do these things, though? Like, why?
Yes, they did. And I'm like, sir, white sir, it ain't people who look like me who make up the greater majority on welfare or Section 8. So first of all, get your data straight.
No, it was created for white people.
Can you say it for the people in the back?
Sure can. It was created for white people. White people get it the most.
Subsidized housing was created for white people. Food was created for white people. In fact, so any kind of social security program was created with the whites involved.
Yeah. People got to understand that there was the condemnation of blackness and the criminalization of blackness has always been in existence, and that's why we saw it happening throughout history, obviously, but like you really saw it even more. It was more blatant because the media evolved to be what it was by the 60s and the 70s, which was also no coincidence because drugs in black communities that were put in there by the government, the Black Power
Ronald
movement, Reagan, Nixon, Reagan, all of them. Yeah, I will always say that. People are always like, well, I just don't think that like that's true. You can literally look up the like statistics. It's free reign. You can look up who gets it. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know we said we're not doing any call of action, but if there were a call of action, before you accuse a black person, a black woman, a black trans person, a black person, period, of erasure, of being complicit, like look up some shit. Look up some things, because I think a lot of those claims are being made off of like the lack of education. And there is not a thorough education in this country around what has occurred in it actually as it relates to indigeneity, but also what it has occurred because of enslavement, right? So there's not an accurate history there. So people are pulling like little tidbits of information they hear from here and there, and they're not looking for the facts.
Also, a big component to all of this that I don't see often enough, and is why I'm very glad that I went back to get another MA in this, is people have to deal with themselves internally. You have to ask yourself why you got so defensive, right? You have to ask yourself, like, what's going on? Let me sit with this for a bit. Right? Like, why is your first response to pop off at a black person or to question them? Why is your first response, anything related to that, right? Like, people have to understand that this is also part of that. And that's something that I have found is definitely not included in these conversations, is just how to deal with you. And I don't mean that in like a simplified way. I don't mean that to be like, oh, this is easy. Nah, this is part of this is part of it. Yeah.
I think something we probably also should have said is, again, I feel like I'm just hitting folks with like all of these really awkward things, but I'm going to say it because I feel like other people who are black feel this. People expect, and whether we're talking about people who are racialized as white or just people who are not black, period, everyone expects that everyone expects something from us. That's what I'm saying. We are expected to do the give.
Yeah.
And I actually understand that, right? Because again, if you look at the layers of how oppression has functioned, why not everybody expect things from black people? We talk about this all the time. People look at us, they expect free shit, right? So why aren't people expecting that black people should just be the ones to like be humble, sit still, just take what people are willing to give you? Because y'all are at the bottom, right? And as hard as it is to say and to deal with, other groups of people who are not black, so this is other people in the global community, have learned strategies of survival, because they're trying to survive white supremacy and whiteness too. But so much of those strategies have been utilized, like racial capitalism, that still reinforce black folks at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I know it's not a great thing to say, but we have to have a conversation around how Asian American folks show up in black communities and commodify in those spaces. We have to have those kind of conversations if any of us are going to be delivered with a DT, right? So I think that's a part of it, right? Basically, people get here and they learn. I use the Irish as an example. When Irish immigrants got here, they were like, black people, We like potato and greens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then white supremacy is like, ooh.
No,
If,
yeah, white supremacy.
if you want to
like,
get anywhere in this country,
no,
you can't rock with them like that. And that has been
no.
every non-Black group in the United States' strategy. Is like, okay, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to survive here,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to survive white supremacy, if I'm going to survive capitalism, then I better figure out the strategy of the most dominant people.
And it's also, this goes back to time. People have to understand that this stuff happened over years. This didn't happen in a month. It happened in 2 months. It happened in 3 months, right? There's an article. There's a piece that James Baldwin wrote it. It's called "Negroes Are Anti-Semitic Because They're Anti-White." And he talks in there about how, there's a part that just came to mind, how whenever Jewish people came over, he said, before I knew it, right? He's talking about this. He's like, they were the landlords, right? Like, we started with this shared identity of oppression, right? But then next thing I know, they're kicking people out. They're the ones, right, that have taken that same place inside, like they have assimilated into whiteness. And I need people to understand that things in this country happen slowly over time. They always do. They always have. A lot may happen in the moment. Yes, absolutely. But it happens over time, right? And so I want people to understand that when we're talking about things like the Irish coming over and then being like, oh, okay, cool, like, we're with y'all. And then all of a sudden they're like, no, we're not with y'all, actually. That happened over time. That happens because of propaganda. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. Happens because of that. It happens because of access to things, right? They saw, oh, I can get access to better housing if I don't say that I'm an immigrant, because you have to also understand, right, the whole eugenics movement and what came along with being an immigrant and the science behind who was inferior, right? You have to look at all this. All of this plays a part. It all plays a part.
And Lettie, you also even have to name the trauma that they experienced.
Yes, exactly.
Right? We came over here because we were starving.
Yeah.
We came over here to escape violence. So we're traumatized already.
Yep. Yep.
Right? I can tie that back to, again, other brown people.
Yes.
We're traumatized because these colonizers doing the most, right?
Always.
And now we got to figure out strategies to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Black people, it looks like part of how you survive in the United States is to engage in anti-Blackness, racial capitalism, and things that will keep y'all at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Until we can be honest about that across the people of the global majority, we can't get to the shared humanity that we need so desperately.
No, we can't. Our country has to want to reckon with that. People have to want to reckon with that on an individual level. You have to want to reckon with that. That's up to you, right? Like, y'all need to, like, you need to reckon with that. That is not our responsibility. That is not mine. That is not yours. That is not our responsibility to do that. And it's frustrating to me. It frustrates me. And this is something the number of people that, and it especially comes up whenever it's stuff with like ancestry, DNA, or whatever it is. And I'm always like, don't come to me with that. Don't come to me saying that you're like, oh, but I'm like 0.8% Nigerian. If you don't get the hell out of my face with that, like, get out of my face, get out.
I low-key be like, I can't wait till everybody figures out that they all come from Africa, but then I'll be like, I want to be dead by then, because I don't want to live in a world where you got a lot of Becky's like, I'm African too. No, please, Lord, I want to be dead. So I want people to recognize their connection to the continent, but at the same time, I want to be dead, because it's going to be a whole bunch of white shenanigans.
Makes my chest hurt.
So, like, I want it to happen, but after I've long went to glory. Okay, we look. Okay, so we got a question. All right, so it says, what do you think is the most effective function or use of history? That's a good question.
Oh, that is a good question. Okay, here, let me actually read. I have to read it too.
But I feel like it needs a context, huh? Lettie, like the most function use of history, like in racial justice or in the medical profession. I don't know.
I can answer it a few different ways. So the most effective function use of history. the most effective is to be able to look at history and look what we did before. We can use that as a guide for the things that were about moving toward liberation and moving toward freedom. But also being able to say, okay, this didn't work. Actually, this wasn't the best. It was good for that time. It worked for that time maybe, but like, we got to do something different. We can't use the same methods.
Can I just put my little soapbox here? This is why I always tell white people, like, y'all make the right choice this time, because y'all been making the wrong choice forever.
Yeah.
But white folks who racialize as white, they keep siding with whiteness and white supremacy, even to their own demise.
Yes. Yeah.
We saw it in the Civil War, where the planting class came to poor white people and were like, help us fight for our slaves. And poor white folks were like, I ain't got none. Mm-hmm. And then the planting class basically was like, but maybe one day you could. Mm-hmm. And that was you, right? Like mind blown. So you basically hang your hat on the possibility that one day you could potentially. And I feel like working class whites are making that decision every day in this country.
Yes. Yes. And that reminded me of what we were talking about before with after the Civil War and the banding together. That reminded me of that's what we were talking about. Yeah. And I need people to understand that the same way that we see stuff happening today with the behind the scenes, what we think we know, right? Like behind the scenes stuff, the making deals, all of that, right? Because that's how this country operates and that's how this country runs. That's what was happening then. The same things are happening then, right? Sharecropping, which was the re-enslavement of Black people. Yes, it was the enslavers that were then the ones who were owning, right, these Black people again. But there are also other white people who may have not owned enslaved people that got a cut and they made a deal, right? Like there's a lot. There were always a lot of inner workings. And I'm not even going to touch on cops, law enforcement.
I'm saying this with gun reform right now. I could just so clearly tie this, right? And it's making me mad on the news because I'm like, can someone please say this? Can someone please say this at CNN? White people have been convinced that they need access to gun to protect themselves from us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that desire to protect themselves from us, and we ain't the boogeyman, by the way, is partially why you can't get common sense gun legislation. That desire of racial resentment and that ethic of racial resentment and grievance is why they consistently support politicians and policies that screw all of us over.
Constantly, over and over again.
So if you want to know why we don't have common sense gun control, and you can tell your mama, your grandmama, Kina said it, it's because white people keep voting against their own best interests, and we all have to pay. You don't need guns to protect yourself from folks like me and Lettie. You need guns to protect yourself from people. Look, girl, if you don't.
Yep, that's why I was like, yep, there's a lot I could say.
The murderer is calling from inside the house, white people.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, we just made this like a white people.
We just did, right?
I got distracted, but
yep.
It's like in the horror film, and they think the killer is outside. No, the killer has always been inside the house, and until y'all can figure that out. But okay, I got distracted.
No, you're fine. But yeah, definitely looking at what we did in the past and learning from it for the future. People say that and it's very simplified. And I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of layers to that though. It ain't just about that. Like, don't just learn. Like, what does that mean to just learn from history? Like, I say that often and I go into depth though, right? Because I want you to also learn, but feel and have some connection to actually acknowledge, take time to sit with it. It's not just about saying, oh, well, lynchings happened throughout history and that was just not okay and we should never have that happen again. No, what you need to understand is that it was state sanctioned violence. Mayors, senators, bankers, presidents, everybody was involved.
The president was the one who aired Birth of the Nation at the White House.
Yes.
Woodrow Wilson's ass.
Yes. And also
propaganda.
Yeah, like this is that's the stuff that I'm talking about. I need people to understand that whenever we ask this question, right, about the function of history, it's not to take the history and to see it in a way where it's just going to favor you, especially whenever you're in the group of people that benefits from racism and white supremacy. No, and no, that's not it. But then I also have to sometimes I have to pause because I interrogate history. The way that I look at history is how I look at history. I'm a historian though, right? Like there's a method, there's methodologies, it's a craft, it's this, but people have to want to see history for what it is, not for what they want it to be. They can't look at it for what they want it to be. And I'm talking mainly to white people. No, you can't look at no.
Okay, I want to redirect us to Black folks. So people who have questions, feel free to add. But I have a question, Lettie. So if I'm the Black person who's at work, pro-Black, Juneteenth coming up, pro-Black, all that stuff, and someone comes up to me and they say, you're always talking about Black people issues. Like, you're silencing Latinas. What would you tell them? What advice would we give our family in that regard?
So if it's a Black person and someone says that to them,
and all they do is just that at work they wear Black pride items, they listen to Black music, they got a whole stack of Black authors on the desk, and someone's like, you're always talking about Black people issues. You're completely silencing us Hispanics. What would you tell that person?
Well, my thing that I would say, because I've had to do I've had to do this stuff before. I would just first start with asking a question, because people have to understand strategy whenever people are confronting you with trying to start a conflict. Whenever you ask them something, you put it back on them, they don't expect you to do that. Something I'm learning with my conflict resolution degree. So I would say, like, do you talk about the experiences of Latinx communities? I would ask them that. Or I would ask them, why does it bother you that I'm wearing this Black pride button? Why does it bother you that I do talk about Black people or the Black experience? And it may make you kind of uncomfortable to do that, but I promise you, if you do that, they're just going to repeat themselves again. Usually they're just going to be like, they're going to kind of fumble. I've been in these situations. I've been in them. I've worked in corporate America. Well, like one of two Black people on my floor. I have worked in all white spaces, right? Yes. And be prepared for people to say things to you. You have to be prepared for that though, too, right? And so, yeah, so I would say, why does it bother you? That's actually the first one I would say is why is it bothering you? I would also possibly, because I'm also petty. But I'm also trying to also answer this in a way where I'm thinking about the safety too of Black people. So that's also the thing, right? Like the safety, because at work you can only say so much, right? Because we're not white. So we gotta be mindful of that. And I'm being honest. I'm not even being funny right now. Like we gotta be mindful of that, right? I'd say that, or I would say, do you know about Juneteenth? Like have you taken time for that? Okay. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would ask something like that. I would ask a question.
Yeah, and like a probing question to create more dialogue. Well, two things too. The reason why I asked that question is because I have been that Black person who's been accused, right? Yep. Like a few years ago, I literally created a networking experience that was only for Black women and femmes. And early on, because my own internalized anti-Blackness and the conditioning, the social conditioning I've had, I felt like I had to justify why no one else was invited to the party. So I already had that kind of like emotional framework to navigate. And then people were like, well, what about Hispanic women? Or what about, and I had some guilt around that. And it's like, I had to prove why we deserved the space for us, only for us. And initially I felt like a monster, like, oh my gosh, am I a bad person for wanting this? And then throughout time, it's become easier to be like, nope, this is Black people only. This is Black people shit. And I don't have to be apologetic about that. So I think that part of how we heal ourselves from the inside out is creating those spaces where we can, well, first of all, Blackness is diverse as hell. So even when we create for us, by us, right? Like we still like, and let me also say this, there are Black Asian folks, there are Black niggas.
I was just about to say that.
We out here everywhere, right? So there's that component. So part of what we need, and I imagine other communities need that too, is those community spaces where we can be full, because all of us are experiencing racial terrorism. It just impacts us differently. And then just in the second part, Lettie, I also wonder in those situations where people of the global majority who confront Black folks, like, well, why are you censoring Black people, da 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 da. I wonder if part of that is a projection of their own feelings about the proximity to whiteness that they have.
Perhaps. Maybe it is. And I guess maybe it is. Could be that. Could be unconscious.
Like if they see people being so unapologetically Black, but you're not at work, like being unapologetically insert your community group, I wonder if part of that's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, does it create a feeling of like, anyway, we don't have to.
I know. No,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
I
don't.
No, I see.
Like being all XYZ, and you got to be extra Black. We can't all be extra whatever, because if I come to work being extra Hispanic or extra Cuban or extra whatever, like, I'm not willing to deal with all that comes with that.
No, I think it could be some of that. I think it's also just internalized anti-Blackness for people. And I'm going to say this because I also see things at a very foundational level and then build on it. It makes people very uncomfortable. Just point blank period, makes people very uncomfortable. I wonder too, and this goes along with your point about proximity to whiteness, with asking that, is that their way of showing us, showing you, showing me, whoever it is, that actually I'm kind of on their side. I'm kind of one of them. So then if they are near someone that's white, they're able to have already covered their bases, and now they can be over there with them. And I can say that because I've experienced that. And this is not just hearsay. This is not just my opinion.
It's something you've experienced.
I've experienced this, right? Just because we don't speak on everything that happens to us, I mean that it doesn't happen to us, right? And that's something else. People have to trust what we say. And I get it. You can't trust everybody. That's just people. That's people. That's Black, white, brown.
But you should definitely listen to Black women.
But you can listen
the only group of people who are strategically, collectively trying to be like white men.
Listen.
That's a whole internet. We are consistently the only group in the United States who have not modeled our framework for humanity by white men. And every brown community is going to have to deal with that. And our community, because we ain't even about to start talking about our people.
Right. Right. Woo! That's a whole other... That's just a live by itself. And
then I can't do that with you. I got to invite Black men into the space and we have that conversation.
Oh, God. Oh, that's a lot. It's a lot there. So
I think there is some pressure there because we haven't used that as our model or not for our humanity.
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah, and I mean the truth is, I know it's hard to hear, but everyone, especially across the Americas, has internalized anti-Blackness. Even Black people.
Yes, absolutely.
Everybody.
Absolutely. Because we're born into white supremacy.
And I don't care if your baby daddy Black, your husband Black, your fiance Black, In fact, I'm even more nervous about y'all.
Yeah.
All of y'all.
And that's a whole other conversation. Anti-Blackness. Yeah. That's a whole...
You saw that video of that white woman with those fake ass braids on the internet.
I'm tired of people.
They are doing the worst.
I'm tired of people. I'm tired of people. I don't even know how many times I can say that enough, but I'm just tired of people. So, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure she was laying in bed beside a black man and said that shit.
I'm sure. I know some people like that.
Woo!
I know some people.
She was like, watch, I'm about to get a TikTok video with millions of views. And I'm gonna be like, black women, why y'all don't support black men? Girl, if you don't go sit down.
Go away. Why are you like this?
You and Tyrone.
And it's like the whole time, it's like y'all the whole ones out here upholding the patriarchy, the white supremacy, all things.
We are not at the DFW, so we are not going to be talking about white women over here. Now, anytime you want to do that, you call me.
Listen, we already have like 4 separate conversations we can have now. From this one live, we have all these others that have come up.
So I think a good way, I'm going to summarize and I'm going to turn it over to you for last point. So 1, stop accusing black people of erasure because we don't got the institutional power. Mm-hmm. Facts. Mm-hmm. Now, if black people start owning the media companies and we start being over all the federal agencies and we start buying up all the lands and the TikToks, then let's have that conversation. But until that happens, don't accuse us of that shit. It's irritating, it's demeaning, and it's violent. Secondly, and I'm going to say this for me, I'm not going to speak for you, I do think there's space to say sometimes we could be last point. So don't accuse, Tony's in the room, so don't accuse black people of erasure because we're not talking about other people's shit. We get to stay in our lane and we encourage other people to stay in their lanes. We should only be doing oppressed justice work, racial justice work, anti-oppression work from a place of lived experience, period. So stop accusing us of erasure. We don't have institutional power. I think there is space to say that sometimes we can be complicit in the sense that, you know, like for example, it was just AAPI month. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so, like, not acknowledging that, you could say that maybe that's a complicit thing, especially for those who are in justice spaces, right? Mm-hmm. So I could say that, like, okay, there have been times that I've been complicit, right? Mm-hmm. But the only thing y'all can expect from us is solidarity. Yeah. And solidarity means we can have an awareness of multiple types of justice issues, but I don't have to put energy into those things. Right. And I guess I am going to say something that might aggravate the folks. Part of why I think it's helpful for people to invest in having a Pan-African framework or even invest in invest in Black liberation, because when you bring the most marginalized people to the center, like I tell people all the time, if Black trans women are safe in this country, then everybody's safe. Mm-hmm. If Black trans women have resources and support, then everybody has resources and support. So in some ways, it is profitable for people who are not Black to support Black liberation because Black liberation covers everybody. Yes. Right? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Expect solidarity from us, but that's it. Stop asking us for any other shit. It's not fair and it's violent. We are all traumatized. So I'm not going up to Native and Indigenous folks being like, oh my gosh, why aren't you rallying for reparations? Nah, y'all need to get y'all land back. Yeah, honestly. Asian people being like, why aren't y'all going around trying to figure out how to get us reparations? Nah, like, you know, like, get out of the way so we could do what we need to do. And I'm talking specifically to people of the global majority. Now, with white people, that's a whole different assignment. Yes. Yeah. But I'm talking about other brown folks. Stop expecting us to step outside of our lane. It's not a fair ask. That's kind of like my, you know what I'm saying? That's my, that's my landing point. We can't be accused of erasure. We can't be responsible for complicity. And we should be responsible for solidarity. Right.
And also, I mean, something that I see throughout history, like that existed a lot, and not that we're not organized in some ways today, because organizing does happen. You do have people that are strategizing. Yes, you do. What I see as a difference is the longevity of it, the consistency with it, right? I have seen this so much the last 2 years. The way that we were in 2020, summer of 2020, whenever we had the Great White Awakening, right?
Faux awakening?
Huh?
I call it the faux awakening.
No, that's why I was being very sarcastic. Like, oh, the Great White Awakening. When we had there was solidarity from other oppressed groups at that time, and you had some white people that were like, oh wait, maybe we should actually like put some money in this or that. I'm not talking about the like performative white people, not them.
You're not talking about the black square folks?
No, not them. Though I do have some of them that are still patrons of mine and still are listening to people like us. Matter of fact, I've seen a couple of them join tonight, right? And so it's like, yeah, like, and so that's the thing, is they chose to see, okay, maybe this is my start, but this is not where I need to stop, right? Like but I can also count on maybe one hand, people that I know personally. But I basically, because I don't want to go off on like another tangent. My landing point, I have two landing points. Number one, I want people to understand.
Wait, somebody said I did a black square. I didn't know. It's okay, Kelsey. It's okay. A lot of people
What?
Square.
Who? What?
Somebody said I did a black square. I didn't know. It's okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's okay. No. We're talking about the people who did the black square, and then did literally nothing else.
Who then turned around and voted for Trump again in 2020.
Right. That's who we're talking about. That's what
Because some of them people did it. I don't care what
nobody
says. Mm-hmm.
Right. Just to clarify, the people I'm talking about are the people I know. I know some people personally. That's all they did, right? Like that's what I meant. I do have patrons. I do have people who show up here, who did not stop there. No, absolutely not. Right, which is great. But we did see that that's all that some people did. That's all. And then it was like, okay, well, I've done that, and now I've done my part. I'm a good white person. We are still black, and we are still dying. Racism is still a real thing.
I mean, I gotta say, a week after, I feel like the internet's gonna get me. I'll be saying stuff and be like, Kina, you know what? People record shit. I mean, I just wanted to trace how deep anti-Blackness runs, right? A week after 10 Black people are murdered in a grocery store, there is no there's no hate bill introduced in Congress to protect Black life. There were other hate groups. I mean, there were other anti-hate bills introduced, but none of them addressed Black folks. And that is because the history of this country requires Black death.
Yeah, because we are disposable.
Again, let me say that again, because I mean, I need people to hold that.
Yeah.
The history of this country, it's not optional. It requires Black death. Black labor, Black commodification, and this is why enslavement is constantly being recreated in different formats.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely it is.
So you can't tell someone who looks like Lettie and I who we need to be answering to or what we need to be responsible to when we're still in the process of racial terrorism.
Yeah, no.
We still up in this thing.
And we got whole lives out here. Whole lives trying to live, right? Like that's the other part of this. But yeah, history. Oh, that's what I was saying before about the organizing and the strategizing. There was a lot of that. There were a lot of groups working together. You see this in like movements, right? Like, I mean, saw it in the Black Power movement, saw it in like the women's liberation movement with other brown groups. of people. Want to make that very clear. It wasn't all these white women trying to be with us. That's actually not. Now pictures might show that. Pictures might show that, right? Sprinkled in there, but
you mean so Susan B. Anthony and them?
The number of
good. They was good feminists. Lily, what you talking about?
The people that honestly out here standing for Susan B. Anthony and all of these other people, I'm like, I want y'all to hear me right now. They were racist. They were angry. They decided we actually can't own enslaved people anymore. What can we do now? We can demand our rights. And in the meantime, we can then lie about black men assaulting us. We can be the ones that got, okay, I won't even.
I know, I got you distracted.
Kina, I'm going to go off because that's a whole issue for me. And it comes up every year around the anniversary of the women's right to vote.
You could go to DFW and we could rant about that anytime you want, sis.
Because there's just a lot. There's a lot.
So solidarity, other groups, other brown people, that's where you are. Yeah.
Yes. And that is what there was common ground though, because they were able to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We need to fight these two things. Okay, so we're fighting racial capitalism. We're fighting oppression. What are some issues that are in our communities that are the same? Right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah, like they're like, all right, housing, food, jobs, like labor, like they were able to say, okay, here are the things that we are experiencing. And then they're like, oh, so we're all experiencing the same similar things, right? So, okay, how can we use our resources to band together to protest XYZ thing? Okay, we're all gonna do this every day, every Saturday for 6 months. We're going to meet at this spot. We're going to continuously protest this thing, and we're going to have people going out into the. There was strategy. There was organization. Now that's not to say that there was not separate stuff going on. I mean, let's make that very, very clear. But what I mean is, there has always been an underlying theme for us as Black people, where we have chosen to see other groups as, oh, look, they're also oppressed. Oh, look, they're going through that. I mean, and again, it goes back to even Haiti, right? We think of like the Haitian Revolution. Like, you have Black people here in the United States that knew what was happening there. Free Black people knew. And then the word spread over some years. And that was one of the inspirations for revolts that enslaved people held here in the United States. Not that it started there, because they were revolting on the ships too. But what I mean is, like, that's when you really start seeing it happen. And so I just want people to remember that there's nuance to history. It's not about just looking at history and just saying, oh, well, that happened then and now here we are. No, you have to learn from it and see what didn't work, and you have to do something different.
And see what hasn't been healed and still
yes.
But you can't get to solidarity if your position is, why are you Black people just talking about Black people stuff? Then we can't get to solidarity.
No.
Because what you've done is create an atmosphere of defense. And now I got to defend myself. So it's harder to see those overlappings. You know what I'm saying?
And also, if I'm out here talking about Black people dying, why aren't you also enraged by that? That's one of my questions, people, is, why are you so frustrated with me talking about Black people dying? Why are you so frustrated with me talking about racism that I'm experiencing? You should be enraged by that.
But I think part of it is, and this goes back to capitalism, right? Because that scarcity model is, if people are talking about Black folks, then that means they're not talking about us. And if they're not talking about us, then we won't get our part. And that's just horrible. That's super horrible.
Right? We won't get our piece of the pie.
Meanwhile, because of your adjacency to whiteness, because of your proximity to whiteness, like, you're already more resourced than we are. You know what I'm saying? Because we are at the bottom of the racial hierarchy in this country. And so it would behoove all of us as people of the global majority to really think about, how can I show up in solidarity, right? Mm-hmm. It would behoove us as Black folks to be like, how can we be complicit in the violence that Asian Americans experience, and the violence that our Latinx family and kin experience? So again, I really want to be clear. We can be complicit, but we're never doing erasure. Like, if nobody encourages anything else, we are never doing that shit. Because we've done too much to break ground for people who are not in our community.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right. If there are no more questions, Lettie, give us the benediction, sis. And then tell people how they can learn from you, support you, watch your glow up, give you A's in the comment sections. I don't know. You be like doing the thing all over.
Okay, the benediction. Well, I gotta close with Baldwin. I mean, come on.
I love that we have these patron ancestors. Your patron ancestors, James Baldwin, mine is Malcolm X. I just love it. I always expect you to mention him in every conversation.
I'm always going to incorporate. I mean, I've already mentioned him once.
Black people, get you a patron ancestor. Like,
honestly,
get you one.
Honestly, get you one. Because they always are right there. They're always right there. I'm gonna tell you now.
My second patron Black ancestor is Ida B. Wells. Like, it's X. And on a day where I don't know what to do, I just pick up some Ida, and I'll be like, "Thank you, Ida."
Yes, Ida will get you right. Ida didn't play. People wouldn't like Ida today.
I constantly tell people, Ida B. Wells was out here reporting on lynching when Negroes were being lynched. You don't get more gangster than that.
No. Ida B. Wells also would just pop off at you real quick. Like, have people seen how long the stuff is that she wrote? Like, sis didn't. Sis was like, I'm not going to tell y'all.
But you know why I relate to her? Because she was like, these men, it's hard to date. So that's...
That is your life.
Oh my God, I'm like, yeah, that is so hard.
I immediately thought of your Facebook statuses. Oh, that's a whole thing, girl.
She was a single Black woman for a long time, and she was out here.
She was. She was, and now I'm just thinking about your Facebook statuses, which I haven't seen one of those in a while. So I have to figure that out once.
Girl, I have to text you later. The latest travesty. Oh God.
Okay. I'm gonna close with Baldwin. I'm actually gonna close with the tattoo I have on my arm. So because it's very, very applicable. Baldwin said, "People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them." If y'all want to read that, he wrote that in Stranger in the Village. It's one of his essays. You can go get it. It's a book, and there's like tons of stuff in there. Anyway, it's Baldwin. You should read all Baldwin anyway. And so, yeah, people are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. So I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to give any kind of explanation or interpretation. Just going to leave it. Because Jimmy speaks for himself. And where people can find me. So sincerely.lettie here on Instagram. Facebook, I'm Sincerely Lettie, and Patreon, I am patreon.com/Lettie Gore. And the links are in my bio here on Instagram. I want to have a website soon, which I'm very excited about, because I'm going to start doing like some consulting with like racial justice type things, conflict resolution things with racial justice and anti-racism work, and just other historical consulting as far as like research help or whatever people need. So
to have a more accurate part of history.
Yeah, because people actually like don't know how to research. Like they're like, I don't know how to find this thing. Can you help me find this? And I'm like, sure, I can do that. So yeah, find me there. And I was gonna say something else. Patreon. Oh yeah, Patreon. I have different tiers. You can go and see how many I have. I offer lessons, webinar, live Q&A, book club. Have a book club. So yeah, there's that.
I want to amplify something. Now I'm acting like a brand ambassador. Lady, I'll get you some. I'm gonna get you some of these.
What is that?
It's called Liberated Love Notes, and it's by a Black woman, Brittany Janae. Actually I was trying to give some of these away earlier this week, and nobody said shit. So I was like, maybe nobody wants some Liberated Love Notes. But everybody needs these in this anti-Black streets.
Honestly, God,
Yeah,
no,
I'm gonna. My friend, my sis Janice got these for me, and I pay it forward. I'm gonna order you some.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited.
It'll be a belated birthday gift. Lettie just had a birthday week, y'all.
I did. I turned 34 last week.
You're looking like you 22. Okay.
I'm fine with that because when I'm 50, I'll be out here looking 30. So I'm
Girl,
fine.
I went to Trader Joe's last week and I bought some liquor and they didn't card no. Did he card me? He didn't even ask for my ID and I was upset.
So it's funny, whenever I'm like going to the store with like sweatpants on, like a t-shirt and have glasses on, because I'm actually blind. Not really blind, but I have terrible vision. But whenever I have glasses on, I get carded more. But whenever my tattoos are showing and stuff, or I have like makeup, I don't get carded as often. I mean, I get carded a little more often. I don't get carded as often, yeah. But I'm always now like, can you card me?
I know, I like being carded. Anybody who work at the stores, card a Black woman. We want to be carded. I want to be like, yeah, I'm over 40, of course.
You don't even look like you that, Kina.
Girl. Okay, well, y'all heard the word. Pass it around to y'all friends. In this month of June, cuss out anybody who want to accuse you of shit. Reparations.
Oh.
Support that. You have one more thing?
Juneteenth is for Black people.
Girl, say that 2 more times.
Juneteenth is for Black people.
The descendants of the enslaved. And Tony, our brother Tony on the call, he made that post, I think, today.
I saw Tony.
And I was like,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now listen, there's space for global conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely there is.
But Juneteenth is about what happened over here.
And I just need for people, and if you're, there are tons of posts. There are tons of posts that we've done. Many of us have done the last few years. Go. What
I want people to do is, if you are not Black and the person who was hired at your company's Juneteenth presentation is not Black, please tell me. Please tell me, because I want to cuss out all those people. I'm waiting to see the white lady who was hired to do a Juneteenth presentation. It's gonna come. It's gonna happen. It's gonna manifest because people don't like to see us censored. Period. Even during the times where we ought to be censored. Yes. So someone's gonna see it and they're gonna say, "Kina said this was gonna happen." I'm like, yeah, because whiteness is so predictable. It really is so predictable.
Yes, it is. Always.
So I'm just waiting to see somebody and Karen. Robin DeAngelo probably going to do some Juneteenth presentation.
God. Oh.
Somebody probably hired her to do.
No, Kina.
Go ahead.
Do not speak it. Do not speak it. Don't you speak it.
Watch.
Don't.
Y'all come find me when you see it too. Please come find me.
Don't come find me. Because I'm gonna already be seeing it. So like, don't even come find me.
Woo! HR 40 is not a bill to give Black people reparations. It's a bill just so people can talk about it, and they can't even get that to the Senate. So y'all call y'all president and y'all call y'all senators and just be like, hey, can you at least just have a conversation about reparative justice? Mm-hmm. I'm not laughing because it is sad. It's just like people can't even have. Lettie, do you know how tragic that is? That we can't even get a bill in Congress that will just say form a committee. That is all what HR 40 is. It is literally saying, let's just form a committee and talk about this.
Because racism.
Anti-Blackness too.
Think of this place. Oh.
Okay, we gotta go. Bye, y'all.
Bye.